the dance, and there's a lot of tools and ways and approaches of how to write, think from an embodied place, and how to bridge the words to or images to dance and from dance. And it's online, so you can reach mindthedance.com.
That's part of your 5 minutes already.
Was it?
No free lunch.
Am I the
Yeah,
one?
because
Okay.
there was an empty slot. So
Okay, so that I'm the empty slot. Okay. Yes, I'm Defne, and I'm from Turkey. I grew up in Turkey, and I lived in Istanbul 25 years. And in the last 10 years, I've been. It's weird to say, but I have the one who has at least systematically invested in contact improvisation and building the community there. And I think I'm the only teacher who is internationally moving around. After a while, some teachers started to say that they're teaching contact, but I really don't know what they're doing. But unless they're hitting each other and calling it contact, they're fine to say contact, I think. But then I felt this responsibility to reflect on that, working also on another level on documentation and somehow creating a living archive through documentation. And to cut the long story short, at one point in my PhD in the contemporary dance department, coming from art therapy background, I shifted my focus from art therapy and how to implement art therapy tools and techniques into the creative processes of dancers. It didn't work in that institution. I quit my PhD. But then a few years later, and I really shifted my focus to the non-academic, non-professional, semi-professional dancers, amateur dancers area, and really try to develop a somatic-based contact teaching and community building. I say community building because I think my interest was that, to be honest with myself. Because I wanted to share what I know to be able to continue what I learned outside of Turkey. And coming from sociology and psychology background, that was how I learned contact, I think. Like, I was really getting metaphors for life and having this transformation on a personal level. And I realized after my own PhD that had to reappear again after 3 years, because my advisor said, but Defne, you're doing a lot of work out there on contact improvisation. You are documenting already, because I was publishing all my class notes online. Whoever was in the class, who wasn't there, teacher, like they were all accessible. Step-by-step exercises, sometimes teams. And at one point, I started collaborating with my students to create these documents even. Like, I wasn't the only one to write them. So it really helped the community to build, and also this lab environment and doing things together. And my advisor said, why don't you just use this and be done with this fucking PhD? And that was the greatest twist of my life, because it made so much sense, and I felt so at home writing that still fucking PhD. But then I really had to contextualize everything. Like, I had to, because I was very ambitious. I will just read the title of my PhD at the end. It is in English, how to say, Dance education on the transitive line between life and art. Contributions of the technique, methodology, and pedagogy of contact improvisation to the physical, artistic, and psychosocial development of dance, the amateur dancers. I'm doing all.
That's like the first chapter.
But then, I knew it was ambitious, but I just said, okay, I'm really going to go deep in some things, but I'm going to lay the ground for other things, for further research. And I did two intensives with 8 dancers who volunteered to be part of this research, but who were already working with me in the past 3 years before the research. And I have done, I really created more of a structured lab environment in these research groups, trying to extrapolate some keywords, perceptions, understandings of what contact improvisation is for them and how it's affecting their daily life. And out of these focus groups and some interviews one-to-one, 7 concepts that I could come up with. But then, of course, they were problematic in Turkish, because all my training was in English, all my reading was in English, so I had to translate them to Turkish. I'll try to back-translate them now for you. The first concept was communication, the second concept, collaboration, responsibility, resilience, spontaneity, exploration and awareness were like they're like big, but then I had to deconstruct all the concepts. But if you look at the chapters of my PhD, history of contact improvisation in Turkey within the history of contemporary dance history, which happens to be a very personal narrative of what I did, because there was no written or like systematic work. So I had to problematize that. This is a very subjective point of view, but that is kind of objective too. Then I really went into these terms in 3 layers: physical, artistic, and psychosocial development, because I had to. As a result, like just again to read the few outcomes, very general things, because I cannot go into the details, but what we could say, based on the experimental group composed of 8 amateur dancers, 5 women, 3 men, who participated in the intensive retreats in Bolu and Istanbul, results of the descriptive analysis reveals that the systematic contact improvisation training in Turkey, i.e. contact improvisation within the frame of the methodology that the researcher proposed, contributes to the development of physical condition of amateur dancers, leads to conceptualization via body and movement, through which it catalyzes or directly leads to artistic or psychosocial gains, attainments, develops collaboration capacity, which appears to have transitive functioning with the phenomena of responsibility and exploration, develops self-awareness, and thus has a positive effect on the communication skills, and is attaining a place in Turkey as a comprehensive, integrative contemporary dance technique, and points out to the importance of documentation of dance practices and the importance of further research in the field. That's a new title.
Of the next one.
It is not. Yeah, maybe just the last sentence.
Missing the between, is it?
Yeah. Like the last sentence is that I had to auto-censor my own PhD at the very end after the coup, just here in Freiburg last year, because there were, of course, like issues on hierarchy, democracy, gender inequality, and how these were transformed and how the capacities of contact affected the developments in the people, but I could not tell them. I could not use the word democracy, sexuality, because my jury was afraid that they could be in trouble also, because it was right after the coup, and there were many people who were being arrested because they were even using peace, and it is still going on. So yeah, so this was the frame. So maybe it's more than 5 minutes.
Slightly, it's okay.
Yes.
Vanessa.
Me?
Sorry, Vanessa. Don't you see the camera facing you? Just...
Yeah. So I'm Vanessa. I'm basically just quickly gonna share something about my master research. The research I did for my master in between 2011 and 2014. I haven't looked at it for quite a while, and so actually I'm gonna read a bit of the abstract because I found that articulating it again, it's a bit weird. And why I'm sharing it, because I found some great connection when I heard you guys from the lab sharing what you were doing, and also, I mean, in terms of relates to content, because it looks at really a perceiving from ground orientation and haptic experience. So each sense is being like touch. So basically, it was research on walking and drawing. And the thesis is called Wandering as Pathscaping, so path and scaping. So walking and drawing through an urban environment, a somatic and dance improvisation informed practice. And I'm going to just read some stuff. So wandering as pathscaping, so I present a practical and theoretical inquiry into a walking and drawing practice grounded in a somatic and dance improvisation informed approach. This is articulated through my experience of walking through 2 different cities without destinations, and that one city was Istanbul, and in fact the friend did some explorations with me, and the other one was Leeds, where I live in the UK. questioning how to allow a state of wandering, so wandering in terms of walking without destination, the perceptual process involved in this state, how this affects navigating, and how the research could reveal an open-ended methodology of practice. So I'm not trying to find any answer or conclusion, it's really, I don't know where it's going. And it does really inform. At the moment, it's kind of creating a ground for my movement, dance, choreography practice, and then I continue doing the walking practice by myself or take people on walks and so on. But it's open, I have no idea where it's going. Drawing on the notion of wayfaring of Tim Ingold and an active line on a walk of Paul Cleed, artist Paul Cleed, it proposed wandering as an embodied improvisational practice that engages in a dialogue between welcoming multiplicities and finding containment, as a method to navigate perception, the urban environment, and the creative process. Drawing on the attention practices of Deborah A., Lisa Nelson, and Pauline Olivero, it looks at the role of attentional and orientational dynamics in wandering. So, and there I started to kind of come up with my own experience of wandering and doing all these studies of attention. I looked at something that I called attentional wandering. And this attentional wandering for me relates to permeability and responsiveness to indeterminacy. Lots of words there. And then there's something else that I kind of really was one of the findings was an experience of the extent of your here, so how far your perception of here can extend and can reach. And this is something that I keep actually using and I keep exploring in different ways. And so this extent of our here is proposed as a key orientational process in the wandering, in which ground is seen as a perceptual model for the visual, the oral and oral fields, and yes, and is emphasizing edges, perceiving edges, and a perception of things that towards us, perceiving towards us. So through articulating this walking and drawing, so basically I ended up being this research, me walking and then drawing, never looking at the paper, and people thinking, what the hell is she doing, especially in Istanbul. And then ending up with this big roll. First I started with just some journals, and then I had this massive roll of papers, and then at the end I kind of lay it out and look at them. I don't know what to do with these rolls of paper, with this drawing yet. Through articulating a walking and drawing practice, it then proposes wandering as pathscaping. So I made that term, but I don't know, maybe somebody else used it, I don't think so. A journey that, like drawing, welcomes, channel, and scapes multiplicity into a path. And so then, we nearly 5 minutes. So the thesis then moves on into explaining some of the findings, which basically I articulated. So there were lots of things that I was exploring, and it ended up articulating them into these 3 modes of attention. Yeah, and one is called groundscape edges. I'm going to show you some drawing and so. One is called inner outer line, and one is encounter synchronicities, and they look a bit like this. Now,
Do you want to just plug in?
And it's better like that.
okay. This is the in and out. So this is not to represent the
rotate it
drawing. Drawing that was really. These are different from the drawing when I'm walking. This is drawing that helps me to kind of then figure out and express my experience of these modes of attention. So we have the inner outer line, groundscape edges, and encounter synchronicities. And then, so combining these 3 modes of attention with some scores, I kind of proposing this for me became like a methodology of practice, which is open-ended, and I'm still evolving. And I invite people to share it with me. I work with the sound artist who does sound walks, so it takes people on listening walks. I shared it with this anthropologist called Tim Ingold, and so I'm I'm very open to share with whoever wants to share and see where it goes. And it can go back in the studio, it can go stay in the environment. But mainly for me, it was something why I wanted to do walking. I mean, there's a history of doing that, but I got very frustrated by working in the studio. It's like, okay, I'm 95 or more, 99% of my time I'm not in a studio, and if I'm looking at perception, attention, any somatic experience, I have to be in my everyday life. So I have to start from my everyday life. And then
Thank you. Is Ante here?
Oh, I don't think he's coming.
He's not coming.
But I'm gonna say bye. Good luck.
Have a good journey. Take care.
Bye. See you back in California.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I hope the protocol goes well.
Yeah.
It will.
He left his, he gave birth to a protocol and he lives, it's like for adoption. So, Jess.
Okay. I don't know if I have a video to show, but I don't know.
Nice.
Maybe it's more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good enough. I don't know. Can you see at all?
A little.
You are a bit in front of
Not the light.
I could just project onto my hair in the most luminous way. So this is from. I want to show something. It's actually a little bit historical now. My dissertation was called "Knowing Bodies / Bodies of Knowledge: 8 Experimental Practitioners of Contemporary Dance." And what I was, after fishing my way through my many interests to try to isolate a particular dissertation, what I got really interested in is actually, we talk about experimental dance, and what do we mean when we say that? And are dancers actually experimenting, or does that just mean I'm trying something new? Yeah. And often it just means I'm trying something new. And so I wrote about 8 different artists who I think are, and make a case that they are actually doing experiments that produce knowledge that's useful to other people. And Steve Paxton is Steve and his Goldberg variations is my first chapter. But actually it's Yuri's reiteration of Goldberg variations and another reiteration by Martin Spangberg that I use to argue that this becomes an experiment because it's repeatable and people learn different things by repeating it. So on and so forth, a bunch of different artists I'm happy to talk about. Well, actually one, this is 3 minutes long, so I have 2 minutes preamble. But I have a chapter on Dancing in the Dark, where I look at Ishmael Houston Jones and Nora Chupamire and Tino Segal works that happen in darkness and talk about what's happening, how are they removing vision from, or lessening vision, and what does that do to the experience of performance? So that, and then I made my final chapter is a practice as research performance piece, performance experiment, where from my perspective as an artist, I actually make an experiment on science or using science as a dramaturgy, and my goal with the piece was, well, first it was I wanted to prove all the cool things that happen when you watch dance or when you're present with dance, and then through Joe's challenging and leadership, my sort of tack came to be, could I actually try to do a valid scientific experiment and a performance piece that exists simultaneously in an evening. And so and what were the things that would bump into each other in terms of that? And so the video I'm going to show you is just a 3-minute trailer from this, and it kind of explains itself. Maybe there'll be a question, but I'll probably be out of time. I would just really like to acknowledge, I think one of our best contributions to science and research is that we came up with a new word. So we were working with Dr. Ida Momenejad. Does anybody know Ida? She's at Princeton now, but she was at Charité doing her PhD in brain imaging, and had been involved with some artists. And together we had her as a consultant on the project, and we came up with the word Wissenturg or scienturge, and in looking at different things that scientific projects should have someone on the team that is attending to the scientific practices. So I will
Scienturg.
a scienturg as opposed to a dramaturg.
Yes.
Okay, so I hope you can also hear.
Do you have a sound?
Yeah, there is. Sorry, there is sound close if you come close, but and you can also see the actual screen. Okay.
I bought the sound thing.
Do you? Okay, great.
What?
You have to connect the Bluetooth. So it takes
Oh,
a second.
well, okay, sorry.
You got the Bluetooth?
I do. What is it called?
It will be called. Something. No, it has some letters.
BS.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Okay. Is it on? Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. Okay, it will be better than just like we don't usually share with each other. So in the lobby before the show, we actually asked people to apply to be subjects, and we chose 6 different people to sit in the front row. The structure of the experiment is that we've selected and created a series of performance actions that we'll perform, and each one has been carefully constructed to foreground a particular performative force. Ready? Ready? Begin. This is the baseline, where we establish a baseline.
Come on, Maggie. We're gonna try to make that line jump. Can you keep it up? What kind of
Here we get them to try to actively make the skin conductance and heart rate. And then this is just visual stimulation, we call it. This one is called body effort. What's going on?
It's a computer just for. It could be because of the Bluetooth interaction, but
Okay.
to play them.
Where we basically
Jumping all over the place.
we just get our heart rate. We go like, do audiences respond to seeing us do effort? This one's called object sensation, where I apparently hit my thumb with a hammer.
You did?
Apparently.
This one's called object material performativity, where we swing a 10-pound weight at the heads of the audience. This one we just play really big bass speakers underneath that are underneath the audience. And we're monitoring. This is their skin conductance, and their heart rates are represented by an ongoing number that's updated every 3 seconds. This is a pig heart.
What is it?
A pig heart.
Oh my god.
And this we call post-Judson dance.
You see the reference?
And it's hard to see. That was a big flogger whip that Jörg hits me with repeatedly while I talk. This is us hugging the audience. You can't really see. Or 2 members of the audience. This we just are doing contact. Each of these were between 4 and 6 minutes long. And then we kind of take all the data and and some grid work, and we project it on ourselves while we dance in the last section. We immerse ourselves in the data. And it was so Jörg Müller is a French circus artist that is my partner. It's quite amazing work.
This was 2 years ago.
This was 2014 that we did it. Yeah, in the spring. And just to share one bit of.
Yeah, you're like 10 minutes off.
Oh, okay, sorry. Never mind. I'm happy to talk more about it.
You can read his dissertation.
Yes, the audience had
And
sensors.
dissertation is available.
They had their
nice.
skin. We measured their skin conductance and their heart rate through a little earlobe clip.
Vanessa.
So, hi everybody, I'm Vanessa. It's kind of a nice link now to Jess' great work, what I did as my master's thesis, so I will tell you a little bit about that. Yeah, but first, how did I come to dance research? I'm also a clinical psychologist. I come from psychology studies, and when I started with dance improvisation and new dance things, I just felt, okay, this is such a great knowledge, and it's like embodied knowledge, and we need that, and it's like there is so much we can do about it, and it should be, and it's linked. So I wanted to do a project on that for my master's thesis. So what we did is my supervisor he's kind of his focus is on time perception. And then I found Asaf's research he did in 2014-13, I think, about labo danse, and it was about entrainment and attunement with audiences, like dance and audience, perceptions and reactions. So we staged 2 different dance pieces. I didn't do it by myself, it was a professional dancer, and they were both 2 minutes long, and we focused only in speed variances. So one was super slow motion dance, like Miriam Gauerfink's work, and the other one was dancing in like with no repetition, only flow. I'm sorry, I didn't bring it because of the sun, but yeah, I can bring it later. So and then we only focused on the cognitive and emotional reactions of the audience. So we had 2 evenings where people came as it was also a performance experiment, and people came as they were invited, and we made sure that they were only dance naive people, so no professionals. We wanted to only have this for the first time. And what we measured was like not only, but it was they wrote down, it was paper pencil things. The measures or the assessment was of engagement to the dance and focus of attention and emotional reaction. Emotional reaction was like these self-assessment mannequin. I think you did the same, like dimensional assessment of emotions. You only say how aroused are you, and there are pictures. Pose. This is not my bell. Okay. Yeah. And the attention and engagement we took from Asaf's work, these were questions like, where during the dance, did you focus on your own bodily signals, or I focused on the muscle tension of the dance, something like that. And what we found, and for the procedure, it was like, there was the dance, 5 minutes long, and after that they wrote down their experiences and perceptions. Then there was the other dance, and they wrote down again. So what we found was the first results were that during the super slow motion dance, they had higher feeling of their own physicality, their own bodily sensations, and also this was a mediator for for their time perception. So they also perceived they had a greater focus on time perception in that special situation. And they liked the faster dance much better. I mean, they were the dance naive, so this should be kind of isolated results for these dance naive people, because they also wrote that it is kind of aversive for them to really see the super slow motion dance. Yeah,
It's not
so
your
now,
bad.
okay. So now I'm interested to throw it away. To continue in understanding more deeply and with phenomenological and different ways, not only paper pencil, what happens, how do these switches or swifts of attention, how do they occur, and what happens like when the dancer is being present or aware, and what is this kind of attunement, don't want to say mechanisms, but what are the moments making it meaningful for the person actually not dancing, and how to, I want to go to different perspectives, like the interviewing the dancer, the professional, and the audience, because this was one directional now. And what else I want to say? Yeah, and making it more clear, because this is kind of broad, like, okay, I'm focusing on my bodily sensations, and this is kind of a passive meditation effect already. So what else can, and more specifically, can dance do for other populations who are not professionals? Yeah.
Thank
Done.
you. Just say the work that you referred wasn't I was part of the team that did the work.
Okay.
Specifically mentioned Colleen Joufflino, who would have almost came for a performance project. That is the student who was bringing a lot of the conceptual, philosophical thinking about time, perception, body. One of the last one, Mathieu. I unfortunately have to leave. Thank you, Jess.
Don't kill anybody before you.
Hi. So my name is Mathieu. I'm French storyteller, and maybe storytelling and contact improv are linked to Mars in kind of distance. Can be between speaking and dancing, because fast speaking, telling stories is something linked with the mind, and dancing is linked with the body. So I'm practicing both since like 15 years now, and I try to nourish both practice with each other. I didn't prepare something structured, so I will just try to give you some seeds on my interest. Both are called art of relation. But generally speaking, in the French concept, when a storyteller is telling a story, the audience is in front. And you should never turn the back. And you don't use a space. It's like this kind of relation. And I can perform in theaters with hundreds of people, and I can also perform in a hospital room with someone who is dying, mostly. So, what is the good distance? Do I perform in a hospital room like I do perform in the theater? So, for example, that's kind of tool that in contact improvisation is very interesting. How do I, every time I perform, redefine my practice, my expectations, and how do I tune my skills to create the meeting? Because I guess I could show my skills and people would say, wow, he's a good storyteller. But Is it what we're looking for? Like, I can show my skills in the dance. Oh, I'm a good dancer. But it's a meeting, so. And in terms of skills, unfortunately, storytelling in France is ridiculously empty. We don't have skills. We don't have schools. We don't have scholarships. We don't have theories. I mean, we have tools about the stories, but we don't have tools about how to tell them. We don't have tools on the body. And most of the time, people speak like that, they open their heart. Yeah, and if it doesn't work, you have to open your heart more. Or on the opposite, I like it, but on the opposite, we have the theater touch, like you make shapes which have a meaning. Okay, so what I'm interested in is how do I tune my audience and myself, especially when I do begin a story, because telling a story is something we do all day long. We are exchanging stories and redefining the world around us with this story. So how do I tweak this moment so that it's a little bit different? And so what I learned, still learning a lot from contact improvisation, is also how I'm in my own sensations, and at the same time is very open to what's happening around, especially like how do I re-improvise my story, generally speaking, to what is happening in the audience without a judgment. Because most of the time I see the people I'm talking to, and each time there is someone that looks very bored or that gets asleep. And it's like very hard. I mean, I guess you experience it, like you speak in public and they don't look to listen to you. That's so hard to deal with. So how do I take distance to what is happening and at the same time being in my feelings, like blah, 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 blah. So that's one of the aspects. What is also common in contact improv and storytelling is that we expect to have a good moment together. Fun or whatever. Storytelling is a lot about making a community, having fun, exchanging something, and it's kind of hard to take a step back and live in this loneliness, being with the people around, or being in a dance and continuing the energy or the mood of whatever I was doing and not just smiling and having a nice dance. How do I manage that? Or how do I end dancing alone all the jam? And I guess maybe it's
You're out of time, but
last time,
yeah,
last thing.
yeah.
What I'm interested in really now is how the way I structure my weight affect my feelings, moods, emotions. Because for years when I was performing contact improv, I didn't have this kind of things getting around. I was just like happy to succeed a role or whatever, or afraid to dance with someone or to fail. And when people were speaking about emotions they have, I was like, what? And now it's something I'm more getting inside of it, and it's really renew my body when I'm telling a story. Like I can accept to change my state of mind and body really quickly, like this alchemy when you're dancing with someone, and that's a great tool. Yeah. And you're never alone. There is a floor.